Hi sunshines, and welcome back to my channel. I'm actually super happy that we're already at episode 3 and we're 4 videos in, so I'm so excited. Thank you all that have been subscribing and sharing and really been supporting me throughout this process. I really appreciate it. So doing a video every week has really actually become really unmanageable for me because I'm studying for my LSAT. I have a full-time job. I do other sort of volunteer work, so it's actually a lot more than I expected. However, I'm not going to be doing a YouTube video every single Sunday. It'll be every other Sunday, and I'll be doing content on my Instagram TV channel that I'm planning to make this week. So look out for old clips from old videos to be posted up on there, and I'll also be doing original sort of just hot takes depending on what's going on in politics and just in the news cycle and popular culture at the time on my IGTV. So that'll be starting next Sunday. I'm super happy that you guys are still here, and let's get into the video. Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I'm Monet, aka Political Bae, and today's episode is going to be about why Black people need to care about immigration, okay? Because I am watching, just not only social media, but just in everyday conversations with people, and the rhetoric that I get around immigration is sometimes so appalling that I find it like hard not to be combative in these discussions, because to some extent it's very scary, right? So there's a number of reasons why I believe that Black people should care about immigration, and I guess it's compartmentalized in terms of intra-cultural reasons and intercultural reasons, right? So intra is within the community and within one, right? Like that's what that prefix means. And inter is, coalitions and combining and sort of the relationship between one thing and the other, right? So intra-community reasons. So first of all, immigration and deportation is a version of state violence. That's first and foremost, right? Prior to there even being an ICE agency, deportation has been used as state violence for as long as we know, right? So when Marcus Garvey spent all of his life in America and he started to make strides for, Black intelligence and Pan-Africanism and started preaching the unity between, those of African descent, the United States federal government worked very hard to sort of come up with whatever way they could to deport him back to Jamaica. In that instance, it was BK Mill fraud, which a lot of people did not think was a real thing because he had an organization and he also had like several different, at this time, like ships were the transportation. So he had vessels that would be transporting goods back and forth. So they sort of used like that company and paperwork that was missing from that company and things like that to get him deported over mail fraud, right? So that is one way that deportation is used as a form of state violence from ever long, right? So because we're now learning about ICE does not mean that this is like a new sort of violence that is being used against people of color and people that are of that exist in the margins of society, right? So that's the first reason that we should be caring about deportation, right? Secondly, there are Black immigrants. I remember getting into a really unpleasant discussion with, I won't even say his name, but this activist that starts with a T and his last name is an N. Yuck. He was on Twitter talking about, Black Americans, why the hell would you care about immigration? So I commented, I was like, there are Black immigrants? Does that not exist? And his rhetoric is that, Black immigrants have historically been used to, I think he said, replace Black Americans or use as mules to become this sort of figurehead for Black America. And I think that that's completely untrue. I think that there are tensions between, I guess the Caribbean population or populace versus the Black African American populace, and with the Caribbeans you also have like the African populace that also migrated here, and how all of those things interact with each other. And I will say this, right? The same sort of xenophobia that Black Americans put onto other immigrants I know that that is there because of the images and the understanding and the depictions that people from outside of America gets fed that Black Americans exist, like, right? So we get told, you know, when we were in our home countries, we get told that Black Americans are lazy and this and that and a third, and we have to understand that those images only exist because certain people, i.e. the media, i.e. the powers that be, have framed those people to look like that, right? You know, in Walter Rodney's book, it's not How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, it's another one. I think it's about, forgetting the name of it, but he talks about how when he came here, he realized that Black Americans are not, you know, they're not lazy, right? They don't have an aversion to hard work and things like that. They're just well informed of what the system is in the United States and how the idea of the American dream is very, very flawed depending on your skin color and what your bank account looks like and your socioeconomic status, right? So what people perceive as them not being hardworking and this and that and a third, that's not the case, right? Like the images we get fed in our home countries is not the case, and we need to work very hard within our own communities and our own families when they start talking that mess to be like, no, that is nonsense. You are Black. You came to this country. You speak their lingo. You act like them. You dress like them. You engage in their culture. And that is a part of what, you know, cultural sort of, cultural melting happens when you immigrate to a new country, right? And the xenophobic things that happen when, you know, Black Americans, you know, interact with Black immigrants, i.e. we see people, oh, this age-old African booty scratcher, all these sorts of things, like all of it is nonsense, right? The reality is we feel these ways about each other because we are told that this is how we have to operate. It's not true. It's not productive. It's divisive. It is ridiculous because at the end of the day, whether you got dropped off in Brazil, whether you got dropped off in Guyana, whether you got dropped off in the United States, we all got dropped off somewhere. Okay? All right. So that's the intra-community sort of why, you know, Black people need to be caring about immigration, because at the end of the day, there is 600,000 undocumented Black immigrants from various countries that are in this country and are facing deportation and violence, state violence, for doing the same sorts of things that their white counterparts have done historically and are not receiving the same sort of violence, right? And that's something that we actively need to fight against, because it absolutely makes no sense for us to be sitting around inter-fighting and all of this nonsense when there is a bigger picture happening there. So now to this sort of intercultural analysis of why Black people need to care about immigration. When we think about immigration, I think we often think about our Latinx brothers and sisters, that there's 600,000, Black people that are undocumented in the United States. But without them even being Black, right? Humanity is why we should be caring about the atrocities that's happening with the immigration policies that exist now, right? There's a saying that says, first it was them, then it was us. And that saying does not go in vain, right? So what that sort of means is we watch atrocious things happen to people sitting right next to us, and we turn the blind eye, or we look away, or we refuse to acknowledge what is happening. And when it happens to us, we turn around and we look and we see, is anyone going to speak up for what happens here or what is going on here, right? Emperor Selassie, when he addressed the League of Nations back in, I believe, 1935, talked about this exact same phenomenon, right? So right before World War II happened, the aggression that was coming from Italy to take over Ethiopia was, addressed to the League of Nations, and they refused to sort of look at it, or they refused to pay attention to it because it was coming from a small African country, and in their hearts of hearts they believed that they should have been colonized anyway, right? So what happened from that point forward, the same aggression that was happening from Italy and Germany and those sorts of Axis powers at that time turned into what we know as World War II, because first it was them, then it was us. First, it was the Africans that was being, sort of the imperialistic powers were trying to take control and enacting violence and fighting them for their own land. And then they turned around and did the Jewish Holocaust, right? So again, first it was them, then it was us. The bottom line is this, right? With President Trump's immigration rhetoric, it is very clear to the extent that he's willing to go to dehumanize people. It is very clear to the struggles and the atrocities that Black people have gone through historically and are still going through today. So if you don't believe that what we're seeing happen to those, those other sorts of minorities is not gonna double down on us in the near future, you have another thing coming, right? I am not here for the anti-Blackness that exists in other communities. I know that there is a strong sentiment of anti-Blackness that is prevalent throughout the Latinx community, right? And that's because of white supremacy. And we also know that within those communities, there are people actively working and fighting against that, right? So we also have to do that work together to sort of build this like bridge of camaraderie that we saw throughout the civil rights movement, right? We saw this with the Black Panthers and the Young Lords, right? We saw this with the Black Panthers and the other sort of ethnic minorities that came together throughout that time and made really powerful stances against what we know today as white supremacy. And to quote the infamous Dr. Martin Luther King, when we say that injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere, I mean it. If we're going to sit down and we're watching what's happening in Palestine, and we're watching what's going on at the borders, and we're watching what's happening in the prisons, and we don't think that there has to be some sort of collaboration across all races that were constructed, then we are kidding ourselves if we think that we have a fight in what is happening in this world. If you think that just, being able to survive off of the menial bits that people, the sort of system we live in affords us, we have a job, we have children, we have a mediocre life, and we go on to move forward and not really have some sort of in-depth understanding of how this world is working and how it's operating, then we need to do some work, right? I don't think that, Black people have to, get up and I'm not talking about putting on a cape and saving everybody. That's not what I'm talking about. We're working on ourselves, right? But we also have to work on ourselves while simultaneously having a critical analysis of what's happening in this world. Every single race and every ethnic group should have a understanding of what is happening within themselves in relation to how it's happening to other groups in this world. Do you know what I mean? Every single thing that's happening is inextricably tied together. Capitalism and racism are inextricably tied together. You know what I mean? The sort of anti-Blackness that occurs throughout the world is a product of colonization. It's a product of white supremacy. And the only way we're really gonna, get past that is recognizing that and working actively towards that. So I do not want to hear in 2019 why Black people need to care about immigration. People need to care about immigration. People need to care about everything. People need to be taking a very close and deep look at what is happening in this world and watching as literally the fourth industrial revolution is happening. If you think what is happening now is scary, watch when we get to AIs and everything is replaced by technology. Where do you think the working class is going to be? Where do you think people of color is going to be? And I'm not saying all of these things to scare you. These are just some of the things that I think about. This is what keeps me up at night. This is what wakes me up in the morning. And I understand that everybody don't have the capacity or, the sort of the time on their hands when they have all a slew of other things to do to ensure their survival. But I'm saying at the very least, we need to be human beings and have compassion and have empathy and have respect for one another. And I'm going to end this there because I don't want it to get deeper than this. So I know this video is a little bit heavy, but it's something that we really need to be thinking about, and it deserves a conversation. And with that, I'm going to say, you are who you say you are. If you say that you are a good, a capable, a honest human being, I think that the world and you yourself deserves a deeper analysis of what is happening in this country. So that's it for me today. Live your best life, drink water, mind your business, and remember, you are who you say you are.